It's the month of April, and that means it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And today we're going to discuss whether or not there is a culture of indifference concerning sexual assault. I'm Delia Parker Mims, and you're watching Access to Justice. Today we are talking to Sarah Lehman of Denton County Friends of the Family. Sarah Lehman is a victim's advocate, and we're just going to have a discussion about sexual assault on college campuses, outside of college campuses, some of the remedies people have available for them, and of course their ability to access Friends of the Family if they were ever in the need to have those type of services. Sarah, can I call you Sarah?
Absolutely.
How are you doing today?
Doing very good.
Trying to stay cool, I hope.
Oh, yes.
So you are a victim advocate for Denton County Friends of the Family.
I am.
Tell us, what exactly is Denton County Friends of the Family?
Denton County Friends of the Family is the sole provider of domestic violence and sexual assault resources in Denton County. They are dedicated to providing compassionate and comprehensive services to anyone who has been affected by domestic violence, sexual assault, sexual abuse, while partnering with the community for prevention and for other healing services.
Okay. Now, you mentioned it was the sole provider. Do you mean in terms of it being a nonprofit, or there is no other agency that provides that type of service?
In terms of, there is no other agency in Denton County that provides that service. While there might be other agencies that do provide counseling, there is no agency that is specific to working with survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault.
Okay. And you mentioned Denton County Friends of the Family provides access to shelters, and that's very important because there might be people in the community right now who have emergency situations where they need to get away. Denton County Friends of the Family would be such a place they would try to contact in any emergency. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It is 100% correct. And we like people to know that we try to keep their lives as normal as possible. So that means if they're working, if they have children in school, those things can still happen. They just happen to be living at our shelter residence instead of in a home that's unsafe for them.
So, and that includes if there's children with them, they would be able to go with you. And they would also be able to help individuals determine what's called like a risk assessment. Even if you're not at the point where you felt you needed to escape, you could go to them and talk about your situation even before you get to that point.
Absolutely. So we have a 24-hour, 7 days a week crisis line. Anyone who is interested in receiving services with us, or if they're ever in crisis, or if they're looking for shelter at our shelter residents, they can always call our crisis line. And really, we recommend anyone who is looking, who is experiencing domestic violence, or is the recent who has recently suffered from a sexual assault, that they can always call our crisis line. It's our first step into entering our shelter to begin with. Okay.
Another thing, Sarah, you actually are bilingual. Is that correct?
It is correct.
You majored in Spanish, is one of your majors, Spanish literature, and the other major was anthropology.
It was.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a different background and knowing about different types of people. So it's important to note that Denton County Friends of the Family serves Spanish population.
It does.
And it also is not just akin to a husband and wife situation. It could also be a same-sex relationship partner where there was violence in that relationship as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So we do know that at our agency, from the people who come to us for services, as well as from research that's been documented, is that relationship violence, you'll hear people talk about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, or relationship violence. Those are all different words for the same things, just because we know that this kind of violence can happen outside of what some people may call a traditional marriage. It can happen when two people are dating, whether or not they're same sex or they're opposite sex. It can happen between teenagers with teen dating violence, or it can happen with other family relatives. So I mean, that's why why at our agency we use the word relationship violence more than domestic violence, or even family violence, because maybe someone lives in your household and they're not related to you, and it can still be considered relationship violence, and you could still receive services at our agency.
Okay. Now, one of the things you mentioned earlier when we were talking, you're a victim advocate now, but prior to that, you worked in education.
Right.
Does Denton County Friends of the Family offer community education to, say, schools or to different groups that may want to have somebody come in and learn about relationship violence or protective orders or things that they may be able to utilize to help themselves?
That's a really great question. So with the Community Education Department at Denton County Friends of the Family, they provide a lot of different resources whenever it comes to community education. They have a specific position that targets schools. It's the community education specialist, and they have targeted education for each. It's all age appropriate. So for instance, for pre-K through first or second grade, they have a program called Bumbles, the Magic Bumblebee, where our education specialist will go out in a big bumblebee costume. But what he's doing there is he's teaching the children about safe and unsafe touches, about healthy and unhealthy relationships, but at an age-appropriate level. Now, there's also different programs for all the other age groups, and they're all age-appropriate, and they introduce different ideas for the students to reflect. For instance, in middle school and high school, they go more into teen dating violence, just because that's whenever they start having those sorts of relationships. We also provide education resources to college campuses. They do give presentations whenever we're solicited. If you have any children who are currently in schools, whether or not it's pre-K or high school or middle school, or even if they go to university, you can always contact the school counselor and tell them about our services. We know that the biggest way to get us into a school, if we're not already there, is for you, the parent, to go and advocate for your children.
And that's an important point. We started off the show talking with the idea of asking the question, is sexual assault, are we living in a culture of indifference? And the aspect that Denton County Friends of the Family provides in terms of education is very important. Now, you mentioned you start off with the elementary students, teaching them about appropriate touch, which is very important. But also you went into middle school and high school. That is critically important, and particularly even in the middle school area when girls and boys are beginning to develop their sense of identity. Let me give you an example. I was a manager of legal aid and actually worked with Friends of the Family, did some education things, and within schools. We went into the high school and talked with girls about, would it be appropriate for their person they were dating to call them out of their name, call them the B word, or call them something like that, or to be upset if they had a friend of the other sex. If a girl had a friend who was a male, would it be okay for her boyfriend to be upset? And the types of attitudes that that population had was very interesting in terms of what women were willing to accept and thinking that was acceptable behavior. And it lends to the idea that not only is there a indifference in general about sexual assault, but our own even victims may think of things differently. Would you agree with that, or did you have any of that type of experience?
No, I would agree with that. And during my time in community education, giving presentations, I did receive a lot of those sorts of attitudes. But we realized that it's not really. I mean, a person may feel indifferent, or they may accept things that they don't deserve to have done to them or said to them, but that's why one of the key parts of our middle school and our high school curriculums is talking about something called the cycle of socialization, where they learn about what a healthy relationship looks like, and where these red flags for unhealthy relationships, these unhealthy behaviors, where they become normalized, where they become accepted, even when they become rewarded. So we get them to kind of reflect on that, to think about it, to see how they've internalized some of those things, and then we provide them with opportunities and different options on how they can make a different choice, how they can choose the healthier behavior, how they can move their relationship or choose to leave the relationship for a healthier one.
Do you think maybe all of our social media, TV, all the things that we have, getting everybody's attention is helping to create an indifferent attitude? Let me give you an example. I kind of think that young girls are learning more to tolerate inappropriate behavior just from the friends they have, from the mean girl friendship. And then you have all these housewives on TV who are teaching everybody that it's okay to be mean to your friend and still go to their party. Now, in my age group, if somebody was mean to you, they were not my friend.
Right.
And it just seems like now, if someone is mean to you, then you try to work harder to win them over. You know, why go there? Why put your child into a dance academy when you're going to have to be yelling at the instructor all the, I don't understand that. Do you think that kind of helps open up the door to people having attitudes that people treating them bad is acceptable?
I do believe that the different medias that children or even adults are exposed to really help exaggerate how normalized these behaviors are, when even if they're normal or common, it doesn't make them healthy. And especially for how prevalent they are, and it makes it really dangerous, especially whenever someone does try to report or say something that's not okay. That's why, that's one of the biggest reasons why we are in schools, just because we know that if someone's going to learn this, it's best that they learn it young so they can internalize it, they can know that this isn't okay, that this isn't healthy, and they can move towards better behaviors. It's a lot easier to be able to say no to something whenever you learn at a younger age, even if you keep seeing the same things over and over again in media.
And I think that's important to emphasize and remember that Denton County Friends of the Family is available to contact if you want them to come in and do a program at your school, because one thing we want to do is try to prevent having someone become your client.
Absolutely.
So you want to start at an earlier age to do that. We'll keep that in mind. Now let's move to a different area. We talked a little bit about the culture, the indifference, and how we are maybe a little bit conditioned to accept inappropriate behavior. So let's talk about some empowering things that we have options. Certainly, Denton County Friends of the Family is one thing in the community that's very important to the Denton community to go to. But let's look at it on a larger scale. Sexual assaults. How often do they occur? Let's say outside of the college environment. Outside
of the college environment, I believe that a sexual assault occurs every 2 minutes. I think that's what our national stats say, so it is very common for one to occur, much more common than people may believe is possible. It's very common.
And then inside the college environment, it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5?
It's 1 in 5, so 20% of college students before they leave college will become a victim of sexual assault.
But the numbers of those people who have become a victim of sexual assault who actually report is staggeringly low. Is that correct?
The ones who report?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many obstacles and barriers for people who are survivors of these assaults for them to actually feel empowered or supported enough to go report this incident. It's very low.
Okay. But the good thing to remember is, and we're going to get into the empowering stuff, is that there's legislation and there are avenues within the community to help people who have been victimized by sexual assault. One person who was sexually assaulted and kind of took back her power was the young lady at Columbia University, and her name is Emma Solkowitz. Are you familiar with that one, where she was carrying the mattress?
I am familiar with it. I believe that she made it part of one of her class projects, and then it became part of a larger awareness campaign about sexual assault on campus and how campuses actually handle sexual assault through their misconduct process.
Right. And in this case, in case you're not familiar with it, was a young lady who alleged that she was sexually assaulted, and the person who she alleged committed the assault was not expelled. So she carried her mattress on her back, and she said she would continue to do that until that alleged person was expelled from school because of the school's indifference or their non-responsiveness to her complaint. The good news is that universities do actually have requirements to address those sexual assault issues. Like, let's take University of North Texas. What kinds of things does the University of North Texas do for students who may have experienced such an assault?
That's a very good question. So for students at the University of North Texas, if they've ever been sexually assaulted, they have many options. If they're interested in reporting, they can always report to the UNT campus police, or they can report to the City of Denton Police, or they can always come to our agency for services. Now, if they're not interested in doing any of those things, they can always go to the Dean of Students office. They actually have a survivor advocate now on campus. That's their specific role and responsibilities is to help assist you if this is something that has happened to you. And there's also the Title IX office that UNT has as well that addresses these things.
Okay. Now, Title IX, that is a very important statute for every college campus. Any campus that receives any type of federal funding is required to have Title IX, and it prohibits discrimination based on sex. And it also includes many requirements that universities have to follow in order to prevent, to be more on the preventive side. And one thing that came of that, it was the Clery Act, which requires universities to actually record or to have it visible when you're looking at colleges online to see what their the number of violence that they have. So that kind of gives people an understanding of how violent that campus may be, and that's a big move. But Title IX, the statute that prohibits discrimination, every campus has that. And you mentioned that there is a Title IX coordinator. Is every university required to have a coordinator?
I believe that they are. If they don't have a specific position, then they have someone who's appointed, since they're responsible for reporting all those statistics. If they don't, then I do know that if they don't, or if they report incorrectly, then they have the possibility of being fined, or they can have funding taken away completely, which I know there's some schools who are in danger of that happening.
Right. There are some schools, and I will not mention some of them because I think one of them might have been one of my alma maters, but I'm not going to mention that. But it's very important that students understand that with Title IX, they have teeth to their ability to file a complaint, to require the school to make meaningful changes regarding reporting sexual assaults, and that includes providing training to incoming classes and helping them to understand the vulnerability or the likelihood of things increasing when there's drinking involved. So schools and universities are put on an active notice when it comes to sexual assaults, and they're actually given federal requirements in order to follow through. So that's something that they can also put their teeth into. There's also something else going on. I believe it is called Take Back the Night. Yes. That's happening on the UNT campus. What is that all about?
So Take Back the Night is a nationally recognized program or event that takes place on the third Thursday, I believe, in April. This year at UNT, it's going to take place on April 28th. And what it does is that it helps memorialize people who have been the victim of sexual assault, but it also is an event to help bring awareness to how prevalent it is on university campuses. So here at UNT is actually one of the 10 Points of Light. They were very fortunate enough that this is their second year to have received that honor. And part of what's going to happen on the 28th is that they're going to hold a vigil, and then they're going to have a march to bring awareness to sexual assault on university campuses.
Okay, so the Take Back the Night campaign solicits 10 different universities to have this memorial on the same day and at the same time to memorialize victims of sexual assault. And so you mentioned UNT, this is the second year that they've been?
I do believe that is correct, yeah, it's their second year.
Were you able to participate in one before?
I was. During my time with the Community Education Department, I was able to help assist them while they were there. I believe during the first year that they received that honor. The Take Back the Night was something that was started by an individual who, just like the student from Columbia University, felt like she was dismissed by her university, by the police that were involved. I believe that she even ended up on Time magazine back in the 90s. So Take Back the Night was a result of that. So it's really an awareness-based event, and that's its main goal.
Okay. Are you familiar with the President's Initiative, the United States President?
Yeah, so something that President Obama and Vice President Joseph Biden have started is something called the It's On Us campaign. And it is a campaign, we recently just finished their day of action this past week, I believe. And what it is that it's a campaign to help people pledge to say that it's on us to help stop sexual assault on campuses. Just because we know that if you see something happening, it's part of a bystander approach, I believe, but not even a bystander intervention approach. It's also about yourself as well. To know that this isn't something that you're going to stand for, that you would intervene or find a safe place or be supportive of someone that you know might have disclosed sexual assault to you. So that's what the It's On Us campaign is all about.
And that's an awesome point to bring up, that it's a bystander involvement as well, because so often we simply think of maybe the perpetrator or the victim, but when you have something promoting it's on all of us and says that there are bystanders who stand around and can watch that's important to highlight. I know I've seen a few of those commercials where they're saying it's on us, it's on us. And I think that's a very good point that you brought up.
Yeah, they've recruited a lot of celebrities to be part of that campaign, which is really good. I think that it helps combat what we were talking about earlier, where media is so heavily involved whenever we're being taught those unhealthy behaviors, those unhealthy responses, and we end up in unhealthy relationships. So I think having those same people turning around the messages that maybe their past pieces that they've been involved in to say that these things aren't okay, that they're saying that consent is needed always, that it's really good to have those sorts of role models being involved in this sort of issue.
And the bystander thing is important because you might see that at parties. You would see that dynamics being set up, and it puts into play in your thought, am I going to sit by and let that happen? Do I know what's being thought about, planned, or what's going to go down? And it kind of puts an onus on the bystander, and I think that's really, really important and a great point to bring up. Now, talking about sexual assault, we've talked about the culture, whether or not we're developing people who are indifferent, and we kind of are moving into that direction. We talked about the empowering things that we have in terms of legislation going on, and the right that people have to move forward with those type of complaints. Let's talk about sexual assault itself. And we're moving towards a time where we're taking the burden off of the victim.
Right.
Would you agree?
I would definitely agree. I think that has a lot to do with defining what consent is. There are many states who are actually actively working in their legislative processes to put that down into a House bill that would hopefully become a law. I know California is on the forefront of that, on defining what affirmative consent is, instead of so people who are enthusiastically saying yes, that they would like to partake in something, instead of waiting for someone just to say no.
Exactly.
So that's hopefully where this is all going.
And the root of sexual assault, not someone wearing something inappropriately. What is that all about?
That's a very good question, or kind of like comment to move into why someone would choose to sexually assault someone. And I say choose for a reason. Whenever someone chooses to do that, they're taking the power away from that other individual they've assaulted. We know from experience at our own agency with the clients that we provide support to, and we even know through national and international research, is that just like relationship violence, sexual assault isn't for sexual gratification. It is for the sole purpose of gaining power and control over another individual. And a lot of people, they say that sometimes sexual assault can be gray. Maybe the person they allegedly assaulted might be... You
said they could be gray?
There might be a gray area. I don't really believe that's true. I think that's a matter of someone not being fully educated on what consent is. So there might be someone who says that if an alleged victim was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, even if they said yes to submit or to consent to something, then nothing happened. However, we do know that that's not true. If you're not sober, you're not able to give consent. So for many people who say that it's not their fault, they had said yes, or maybe they said yes to one part, they didn't consent to everything. So that's part of the miseducation that I think we're trying to get to, is that everyone really needs to be fully educated on what consent means. And another thing that we encountered a lot whenever we would be, whenever I was in my community education position, is that for some reason the media that children and youth have been fed a lot is that it's awkward or not good to be able to ask for something, or to ask for gratification, or ask for anything like that. So for someone to say, wouldn't you rather someone be enthusiastic and want you to reciprocate? A lot of them said no, which is really concerning.
Well, the good thing is we have Denton County Friends of the Family that is available to provide that different type of not only education, but the access to support in terms of when people need to get away when it's an emergency, and the education so that we can try to prevent having those types of situations. We've come down to what I call the, I'll give you 30 seconds to kind of talk with the community on anything you would like them to know about what you do, or what Friends of the Family is available, or anything about the topic in general.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I would really like everyone to know that we are available to you. Even if you don't necessarily live in Denton County, that doesn't mean that we can't provide services for you. We provide anything from counseling from ages 3 and all the way until adulthood. We provide advocacy services if you're ever looking for assistance in reporting, if you're unsure if you want to report anything, even if you never want to report. It would never disqualify you from receiving services from us. We try to help and assist you in any way possible.
Sarah, thank you for coming today and talking to us about Denton County Friends of the Family. There's so much information out there that's available with them, and opportunities for them to help you. 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted. The Center for Disease Control would consider that to be an epidemic. And with that kind of information, it's important to know that there are agencies like Denton County Friends of the Family available to you to help you if you're in that type of situation. And there's also federal legislation available that you can avail yourself to if you're on a college campus, because those numbers are just as high on college campuses as they are outside of college campuses. And I want to thank you for coming and talking to us today about what you do and what your organization does. And I'm Julia Parker Mims. You've been watching Access to Justice. Thank you for watching.